Now, I do think it is really important that when we get in and think about the concept of blended learning coming around a digital learning journey, and now digital learning journey definitely brings in the components of technology with it, but we do think about blending different. So the concept of blended learning has been around for probably about 20 years, maybe a little bit longer. I forget when the actual term came about. I mean, we've probably been blending under the really old school distance learning for a while, but for the most part, I would say there was when you started to add in like a WBT or a web-based component, maybe a little bit of a live component. But the concept is the old definition of blended learning was a lot more like a tossed salad. And what I mean by that is when we blended them, they came together to create something that could be effective, but each individual component was its own thing. I could still take the WBT out and it still stood by itself. I could take out the ILT components and that stood by itself. I could take the job aids and they kind of stand on their own. But when we think of the true blended learning for the digital learning journey, it's more like a smoothie. And the idea is that when you're bringing all of the assets into this experience, they are actually combining in a way that is actually able to create something more than just the sum of its parts. And that's where I get into the concept of a tossed salad versus a smoothie. It's a new approach or a new way of thinking and how we start to really blend our digital learning experiences. So we're trying to not only get across the enterprise, we're integrating some of the elements of the operations using data intelligently, going from a dynamic learning system to a smart learning system. We're actually now taking in the connected points between the micro learning component to the social learning components, and they're all coming together to create a truly integrated experience. And I think when I talked about becoming a recovering instructional designer, this is fundamentally another dimension of that new way in which we need to think about how we design. It's bringing in new disciplines, the concepts of user experience, the concept of data analytics. How do we use the right, capture, collect, and draw insights from data for ourselves as designers or pushing it out to performers and learners? So there are new dimensions that are coming into this, and this is from a design standpoint, one of the new things that we're really blending into that. One other thing I think it's a really new concept is in that new design component we have in here is I also talk a little bit about the concept of negative space, which comes more from the art world. So in the art world, when you think about, putting paint on a canvas, it's important to think as much about the negative space. It's not just as important as the paint you put on the canvas, it's what you don't put on the canvas. It's the combination of that's important. And when I talk about designing for negative space, we need to be able to create in our designs room for the learners to step in and take accountability. We need to have space where they can go in and own the experience, draw their own relevance, connect with others, create part of that unique experience that they're bringing forward. That's another element that really comes into us, and it's something that is very counterintuitive to a lot of, I think, traditional designers have been brought into this, or the way in which learning organizations have been brought in. We have been more focused on what we produce, what we build, the end-to-end narratives that we go through. If we think about the success or failure of like a WBT, is whether somebody could get through it, they could find the next button, they got all the way through it, they clicked close at the end. Hopefully they learned something, maybe they took a little test, but that was it. In the new design of what we're going for digital learning, the learners themselves are a critical component of it, and you need to say it's most important of what I don't put into it, what I create space for, is just as important as it is for what I actually put in the end-to-end journey. And I will tell you, not all struggle is bad. Growth is painful. It is new. Learning things is not easy to do, but when you're actually accomplishing and moving through it, it's a necessary part of the process. And so you can strategically bring in and leverage aspects of emotion and ownership and bring those into designs, and that's critical, being able to have that and create that space. But it fundamentally starts with the expectations that the learners, again, will be taking accountability for their learning journey.